Welcome to the Nonprofit Edge, a podcast series to promote purpose in practice. Each week, this webinar series features an extraordinary individual that provides valuable and impactful services, helping to transform the capabilities of their nonprofit clients. Join us as we explore a variety of topics, all vital to the success of nonprofit organizations. Learn and grow from the experience and expertise of our featured guests. Without further delay, let's introduce you to the host of the Nonprofit Edge podcast series, Chris Looney.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Edge. I'm joined today by Chad Paris, CEO and Creative Director of Parisleaf, a branding and communications firm that partners with nonprofits, universities, healthcare institutions, and helps them bring their missions to life through storytelling, design, and strategy. Today, we're diving into one of the most critical yet often underestimated aspects of large-scale fundraising campaigns, and that's communications. Whether it's a university launching a billion-dollar comprehensive campaign, a hospital expanding its facilities, or a nonprofit seeking transformational support, the way an organization plans and communicates its campaign can make all the difference. Chad and his team at Parisleaf specialize in helping organizations find the right message, unify their internal and external audiences, and inspire donor confidence throughout the campaign journey. And we're going to explore what great campaign communications looks like from the earliest stages of planning through launch and beyond. So welcome to the show, Chad. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Glad to be here, Chris. And hello, listeners, whoever you may be. Great to be with you all.
Yeah. Well, what I know about our audience is that they are interested, committed to, and fascinated by all things nonprofit leadership related and fundraising related. And so this is going to be such an important conversation for them. And I appreciate you bringing your expertise to the show. So let's set the stage a little bit. And the first question I'd love to shoot your way is something to do with the big picture. When you think about campaign communications, what does that term really encompass?
Yeah. So it is a great question. I'm glad we're starting here and setting the stage, Chris. I mean, I think campaign communication often very much misunderstood. But at the end of the day, in its most simplest form, it's the story that connects people to the purpose of the campaign. Why are we doing this? So, sure, it includes things like, a campaign microsite, your case, your anthem video, your visual identity, but those are just tools. And so, when done well, though, communications is what gets humans behind the campaign aligned around one really core message. It's about what these human beings are saying and why it matters. So great campaigns, though, they make people really feel the why. Why should we support the campaign? Why is it important? What's the impact that it's going to have? And have that ultimate clarity. And the goal is to really make donors feel a part of a meaningful movement. It's how we really get people to act through their time, talent, and treasure, right? Regardless of their role in the organization's ecosystem. So just a short story, if I may. I'm a storyteller, so you'll have to excuse me, Chris. But I think the greatest example of branding and storytelling, how you really connect strategy to a story, and how it can move people. Have you ever heard the JFK kind of NASA story where JFK is kind of walking through NASA and he sees this janitor just feverishly working, cleaning up bins and mopping and sweeping, and JFK stops and to engage with the janitor, says, excuse me, sir, what are you doing? And his response is, sir, it's very simple. I'm putting a man on the moon. And I think, campaign communications, when done really, really well, I think is a very, similar story. What we're trying to do is to get folks unified, to have a shared songbook that's messaging and storytelling and sure, visuals and all those fun digital elements. But at the end of the day, you're trying to really get folks aligned around a unified message that helps people understand why are we doing this? Why should we support this campaign? And if you get folks really aligned, you get everybody sharing that same songbook, then we believe that's really a great way to move donors, move hearts and minds. So we can into this a lot further. I'm sure we will, but I feel like that's kind of a good place to start for us.
Yeah, no, that sets the stage extremely well. And here's an interesting spin and question. Why do you think so many organizations underestimate the importance of early campaign planning?
Yeah. Another really great question. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's really a comfort thing.
Okay.
I think most successful fundraisers, whether they realize it or not, are at their core communicators. They're really great storytellers. But as soon as you start throwing around terms like communications and branding and marketing, they get a little less comfortable. They tend to focus on their comfort zone of things like data, and leadership and building out talent and recruiting the right fundraisers. And they tend to, in a lot of instances, even delegate, brand and communications and story to a central communications team who, candidly, very few in my experience actually understand the nuances of fundraising and donor interest like you and I do,
Right.
and like so many fundraisers do. I mean, just the simple fundraising 101 fact of 50 to 100 people are going to be what help you raise about 90 to 95% of your target. That is enough to make a traditional central marketer's head spin.
Yeah, good.
Because they're focused on the masses. They're focused on potential current students or patients, or patrons. They're focused on parents and families and faculty and staff and docs and peers and community and leadership and board members. I mean, it's just too many audiences. And so I think it's very rare air for a centralized marketing leader to really have the experience to actually get the fundraising nuances that in so many instances it's a lot of human to human. That other 5 to 10% of that target we just talked about, that 90 to 95% that 50 to 100 people are going to make up, they understand that market. That's the masses. And those are really critical markets. They're the folks that are going to give the $100 gifts. They're the folks that maybe give $1,000 gift. But you and I both know there is no donor on the face of this planet that's clicked, maybe aside from Mackenzie Scott, that's clicked a donate button and said $50 million, from an online engagement
Right.
or
Right.
a Facebook ad. So I think most fundraisers worth their salt and who have a ton of campaigns under their belt, they will, if they're really honest with themselves, they will tell you that a campaign really is just a big marketing push. You're selling an idea that doesn't exist yet, a tomorrow that we hope to create together. But one of my favorite quotes, because you have to excuse me, I'm venturing into enemy territory here, but Martin Grenzbach, GG&A, great quote in one of our conversations once that um, he said to us, "Look, this campaign is going to be successful no matter what. We're going to hit our number, but the difference between a mildly successful campaign and a wildly successful campaign is what you guys do. It's the communications piece, and if it's done really well, it's getting people aligned behind the unified voice and the unified message, getting everybody sharing the same story and understanding the vision that this whole community hopes to really create together." So again, I say I think the best fundraisers, they're great storytellers,
Yeah.
but they've just never quite couched it under communications and branding.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I appreciate that quote, and it's not enemy territory at all. I don't know if you are aware of this, but my father actually worked for GG&A for a long time,
Did
and
not.
so Marty and
Yeah.
John are good friends.
Yeah.
Uh, he also worked for Campbell and Company. I worked for CCS, so it's
Yeah.
really funny. And we
Yeah.
met at the Giving Institute, right? So where they're all assembled, and there's a
Yeah.
kumbaya
Yeah.
around.
I should have said friendly territory. I mean, we're all fighting for the same thing, and the ultimate hope is that we're growing the pie together.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my favorite fundraisers of all time, Tom Mitchell, has been a great mentor of mine, previous president of Foundation at UF. when I asked him like, hey, aren't you worried about, all these other institutions who are going after the same amount of money or, same donors? I said, no, not at all. Much more interested in really, the rising tide of all seaworthy boats and really growing the pie. And he really meant that. And I really appreciated that perspective. And I think that's part of what's so different about nonprofit fundraising compared to the for-profit sector.
Yeah, yeah. Tom is awesome. Funny that you mentioned him as well in this context because he was my dad's client at GG&A at Iowa UCI before he moved to
Yeah.
Florida, which is really awesome. And I got the chance to work with him at UCI too. Um,
Great.
so let's move into sort of the early planning stages. And I'd love to ask the question around when things should kick off and get started. So when should institutions really begin thinking about their own campaign communications? When does that
Yeah.
happen?
We get this question a lot. It's probably one of the first five questions that we get,
Yeah.
and I love this question. And my answer, though, maybe insufficient, is always yes. And
Yeah, right.
yesterday, that's when
Right.
we should
Right.
start. Is
If you've already asked the question, it's too
if
late.
you literally my follow-up. But the earlier you bring in communications, the better. I mean, from day one, story and strategy should really be operating hand in hand. And that's how we really see kind of counsel and communications, or as we call it, communications counsel in many cases. The early alignment means that we're going to get authenticity right out of the gate. So something we've been testing recently actually is even during feasibility study interviews, we're doing some of those interviews together. So this is something really new and exciting that we're testing. Because what we found is that in many instances during your donor interviews, you're asking a lot of the same questions, but maybe from a different lens or looking for a different outcome, right? You're looking for, propensity and capacity and appetite, right? Motivations as well. We're strictly focused on motivations, right? We really look to you guys and to fundraising leadership to be the ones telling us who we need to be talking to making sure that we're talking to the right people, but we are strictly focused on motivations. So that's a really great example. But ideally, these conversations are happening in tandem. I will
Yeah.
tell you, timing wise, the readiness phase is the sweet spot. We'll
Perfect.
settle for the quiet phase, and at a minimum, no later than about 6 to 9 months before public launch, and even that is pushing it. But the reality is, they're going to do it anyways, so you might as well get it done, and with the understanding that the brand needs to be fluid and flexible. It needs to evolve, just like your case should. It needs to be living and breathing. But the sooner you have the brand, the message, the story nailed down, the sooner you create that clarity and confidence that campaigns, that fundraisers, that development officers need to really thrive in a campaign and really start benefiting from something that, again, you're going to invest in it anyways. So we might as well bring it into some of these earlier stages. Because I'll tell you, I cannot tell you how many times we've sat in one of our messaging workshops, kind of a critical phase for us that kicks off our right phase, our messaging and storytelling phase. And at the end of the workshop, hearing the fundraising leadership, the institutional and organizational leadership go, man, this is like, it finally feels real. It feels more concrete than it's ever felt, right? And so
Right.
I think that's really what brand does, is it really makes it much more tangible. It gives it, something that you can really wrap your arms around, put your finger on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was very prescriptive and helpful. And I love the idea of partnering with the philanthropic counsel on
Yeah.
the pre-campaign planning study
Yep.
questions
Yep.
and interviews. I think that's so cool and probably super powerful too to have the two brains of the sort of fundraising consultant and the communications counsel partnered
Yep.
together. So thanks for that
That
advice.
what you just said, Chris, is dream team. In an ideal world, this is literally how we designed our shop is, we sat down at the Giving Institute, we sat around fundraising council, and we heard about the challenges they were having with campaign communications agencies. And
Mhm.
then we literally designed our shop to complement both the needs of the shared partner, but also of campaign council, because you guys are so smart. You have so much great experience. Why wouldn't we bring you into the creative process? And vice versa. So
Vice versa.
ideally, we're sharing information so that, I come from a family of accountants and yet I went creative. So the formula of 1 + 1 = 3 makes perfect sense to me.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good. That's good. Your parents are horrified, but it
They
makes
are.
sense. Yeah.
But my grandma's proud. She was the creative.
Oh, good. Good. You can always find someone. Yeah. You can
That's right.
always, it came from somewhere.
Mm,
Well, what does the effective prep look like before a campaign goes public, let's say?
yeah. I think, the first step is you got to get clear about the why. Why is the campaign needed,
Mhm.
more now than ever? Obviously, you have to understand, the priorities, the difference between need and want. Internal alignment, I already kind of mentioned that, but between advancement development team, central marketing communications, leadership, campaign committee, your board, and then really starting to engage the next ripples. But I think that's a really critical piece of a successful campaign is when you can get everybody really singing from the same unified songbook about, again, the tomorrow that we hope to create together. So as you know, and as I know, I mean, most organizations, they know what they need.
Yeah.
The magic really happens when you connect with what do donors want to support, right? We've been hearing a lot of this lately that donors are interested in giving through an organization, not to. It's an articulation of my purpose, my vision, my mission, my legacy as a donor, as a partner, as an impact investor, right? So when you can really understand, what are donors interested in and connect that with the need that we have. But it's also about finding those institutional organizational priorities and donor passion, and then getting really clear on articulating why it matters, what the impact we hope to create as a result. Now, many traditional fundraisers, they'll tell you this is just a case for support, right? But you only have so much time to really pique a donor's interest. I heard a higher education institution have this in their brand guide read this week. People don't read anymore. And so to expect that a donor's going to sit down and read your 15, 30, 45 page case versus having a conversation. Now, not to say, a case still has its place, but you have to earn the right to ask for that amount of time from a donor.
Right.
Initially, where it starts is with the hook. What are we doing? Why does it matter? What's the impact that we hope to create together, right? All of those things really need to be articulated. So I think, what a lot of effective preparation looks like is that unified songbook. But that really starts with, what we like to say, strategy starts with who you talk to, right? And so we need to get really clear and talking with stakeholders that, as we like to say, really get it. They understand where we stand and what our aspirations are, and they'll give us a similar look at from a different lens. A
Mhm.
lot of different lenses really kind of come together to help us create that unified storytelling platform and campaign communications.
And so that's how you really help your clients uncover their core message or the big
Yeah.
idea or the
Yeah.
why. It's the stakeholder conversations. I know there's a lot to it, but that's one of the key or core elements of your work is to
Yeah.
meet those stakeholders. And I would imagine that it's broader than most people imagine in terms of stakeholders. Most people would think, okay, several key donors, board members, but
Yeah.
it's probably the program staff or the professors or the deans
Yeah.
or it's unending. It almost seems the number of stakeholders that exist in a
Yeah.
complex, sophisticated, large organization.
Yeah. It's the leaders, it's the patients, it's the students, it's the communities that we're serving. It's sometimes even the patients that chose not to come here, the students that chose not to go to our institution, or the donors that are no longer supporters, right? We want to understand their perspective as well. But the other piece of it, and this is really critical to our creative process, is this idea of really co-creating together.
Okay.
Many of us have seen kind of Mad Men's Don Draper style of what we call ta-da, right? It's you take the veil off and ta-da, don't
Right.
you love it,
Right.
right? But we believe in more of an iterative approach of,
Love
hey,
this.
let's kind of roll up our sleeves and create this together, because our people, they're really smart and really creative, but they're missing a lot of nuance and trapdoors that you have this institutional historic knowledge. And fundraising counsel, again, ideally at the workshops with us, they have other really great industry perspective of what's fundable. And so all of those ideas come together, and we end up co-creating both the messaging, storytelling framework, and then ultimately the visual framework as well. So,
Yeah. So I guess
you
this
know,
is where you start defining yourself as a partner with the
exactly.
organization, as opposed to,
You just said my favorite word, Chris.
yeah, good, good, good. Well, I love the Don Draper reference. That's awesome. But I think it's worth reiterating too. I love what you said about people giving through an organization and not to an organization. That's such a powerful concept that I don't hear a lot, and I
Yeah,
that that has some real great traction for me. And then just this concept of co-creating in partnership with
yeah.
your clients, which makes them
Well,
feel engaged and feel good about the process and no surprises.
yeah,
And
yeah,
the ta-da is scary. I mean, there's no reason
yeah,
it should be that shrouded in mystery and scary, because you're
yeah.
just apt to, offend or find something that people hate, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, as a shop that used to do ta-da, I will tell you, it feels awesome when you stick the landing. But that's only 50% of the time. And when you have
Right,
that kind of
right,
Don Draper moment, they go, "Oh my
right.
God, this is the most brilliant creative idea I've ever seen." It feels so
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
but it is so inefficient. And the one thing that is the most resource constrained at nonprofits is time. And so we got to make sure that we use time well. And we found workshopping is the best way to. So we call it aha as opposed to ta-da. We want kind of these epiphany moments.
That's so
Uh,
good.
yeah, we're
Uh,
storytellers, so you'll have to excuse me. Yeah. Probably, thankfully, I'm not a copywriter at Parisleaf. I just more on the strategy side, but I do like to think of it kind of in those aha terms.
no, that's great. Aha, and not ta-da. I'm taking so many good notes. Anyway, well, what are the big mistakes that you see organizations making in these early stages? What are they doing that they shouldn't be doing?
You mean like not hiring us?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah. Aside from choosing another agency, what mistakes are there? I know you get hired by almost everyone you pitch to, so don't give me that. But when they don't have counsel, let's say,
Yeah,
or they don't hire the right kind of firm, no
yeah,
firms being named here, but
yeah,
what are the mistakes that get made most often, and are just maybe even the ones that are just um,
yeah,
the things that should never mistakes that should never be made.
yeah. First, I want to go back. Yeah, I mean, I said that kind of jokingly. We're not the best fit for everyone, and I think right fit is so important. I mean, you've seen this in your career, and so much of this work is about relationships, and you're working together in the trenches for years. Very much like hiring a really close employee or partner or colleague, right? You got to have really great chemistry. So we don't win every pitch, and that's okay. But you've seen this firsthand. Like when you find that right chemistry, you just make magic happen.
Right.
So I think that is kind of one of the mistakes is maybe people. get distracted by the bright lights, the razzle dazzle,
Mhm.
looking at a portfolio and go, wow, this is such great work. And then forgetting to be like, well, but would we actually enjoy working together for the next few years? Right.
Right,
It's a
right.
really important piece because at the end of the day, it's people. I would say, the next piece is just rushing. It kind of goes back to that timeline question of,
Mm,
not thinking about this early enough.
good.
I told a potential partner recently, you better tell them what the brand is before they tell you what it is. The decision's kind of made for you. A lot of ideas are coming in on, what the campaign name should be, and it's like, gosh, we're so far out ahead of our skis, and you better start driving this process, or someone else is going to start driving it for you. I
Mhm.
would say, the third piece, beyond, chemistry and timing, is really skipping alignment, not doing the intentional work of getting everyone at the table and getting the right folks aligned at the right stages in the process. Again, it's such a human to human movement that you're really creating here, especially in those initial phases. That initial energy is so critical, before you go public. As we know, traditional counsel would give you advice, you're going to go 50 to 65% of target before you go public. That's a lot of groundwork that needs to be laid. And so making sure you're inviting the right people to the table, the right data to the table, the right partners to the table. The fourth would probably be, not inviting counsel to the creative table, and vice versa. Again, this idea of 1 + 1 = 3. We should be in lockstep as really critical advisors to the fundraising leadership that we're working with, and absolutely sharing information with each other, because we're going to be there at different stages, hearing different things, and we can really strategize together. Us from the communications lens, and yours from more of that, strategic data driven lens as well.
That's awesome.
But I would say additionally, two more things, really treating this like, just another project with a brand wrapped around it. We see that a lot, and that really kind of takes you to the last piece. And I mentioned it earlier, but it's delegating one of the most essential ingredients of the campaign uh, to central marketing department and leadership, because they know branding and communications. But again, you do too. I think, again, you just didn't know it was called that. So I would say those are probably my 5 or 6 really big mistakes that I've seen along the way. But that last one, I got to tell you, Chris, um, fundraisers need to lean into the discomfort. I heard a Lane Kiffin special recently. Lane Kiffin's hot right now, especially in the South. But he was talking about, the importance of being comfortable, being uncomfortable,
Mhm.
and I think when it comes to fundraising leadership, they're really uncomfortable with the idea of branding and marketing. It seems so vast and really unmanageable, but it's so natural for fundraising leaders who come into the process we've been able to partner on, and it's just second nature to these guys. So I think it's just kind of leading into finding the right partner, and really letting them guide you and teach you on the things you don't know, and then vice versa. Let you teach them on the things that you know really well, like that institutional knowledge.
Yeah, that's great. Um, when you think about moving into the visual and verbal identity, that's meant to explain the why and inspire donor support, um, how do you kind of make that translation from goals to identity, or goals to visual verbal content?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think goals are really important. It's the modality for how we're going to succeed and fulfill our promise. But at the end of the day, like Steve Jobs would tell you, Apple didn't sell features. That's why they were so successful. They didn't sell bells and whistles. They sold the idea behind, and the freedom that this would create as a result. I mean, so many of us walk around like this because of what Apple has done for better or worse, right? I don't think they fully realized, how connected we would end up being. But that was so much of what they talked about. It wasn't you're going to be able to touch your screen and access your social network so quickly and be able to communicate so much easier. That's bells and whistles. It was about thinking differently. It was about making life easier and more connected and getting more of the information right at your fingertips. Um, so I think in a lot of ways, goals are really the bells and whistles, but the best way to inspire is through authenticity. Every institution has the meat. It's the programs, the proof points, the reasons to give, but very few really tap into the sizzle.
Mm.
And it's that emotional spark that makes people say the three most magical words all fundraisers really look for from a potential partner and donor is tell me more, right? Um, and so I think most campaigns, I think they tend to they think they're at the 30,000 foot view, but they're really only at the 5,000 foot view. Here's everything we do. Here's why we're great. Here's why this is needed. Here's why you need to support us. But the goal is really to lift it even further into the 30,000 foot view. What's the bigger story? What's the vision that donors just desperately crave and want to be a part of this movement? And I really think we believe that that's where inspiration lives, is when you really marry authenticity with vision. How are we going to do this and approach the world in a way that's incredibly authentic to our organization in a way that no one else can? I think that is your major differentiation, Spark. It's the one thing that you can't take away. As Dr. Seuss said, you are you. That's truer than true. There's no one alive who's youer than you. I think you, as an institution, as an organization, as a brand, that is what makes you more authentic and more different than anything else. It is that authenticity.
Yeah, great Dr. Seuss quote there.
That's facts. There's research behind that quote.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I challenge you to prove it differently. Um,
My 3.5-year-old would absolutely have that debate.
yeah, but if you debate it, you have to put it into Seussical language. But that would be fun to have a Seussical
Oh
debate.
man,
Yeah, yeah.
I
That's the
never
only kind of
debate with
debate
my
I
three
want
and a
to
half
have.
year old.
Yeah,
Yeah, my God, he's a great negotiator. Oh
yeah,
man,
I'm sure of it. I'm sure
yeah,
of it.
it's
Um,
relentless.
but I liked specifically what you said about the 30,000 foot view, and we all say that very commonly. Hey, you have to look at the big picture, 30,000 foot view. But when you made the point of only taking a 5,000 foot view, it really hammered home to me the idea that wow, we're not opening up that aperture enough very often to really see. We need to go higher. We need to go broader and oftentimes we think we're high, but we're not. So I wanted to reiterate that because I think it's so true. Um,
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you kind of thread the needle between the institutional brand and the campaign brand, which oftentimes have, I think, some very different uh, identities, if I'm not mistaken. How do you deal with
Yeah.
the
Another great question, Chris. I mean, so for starters, we think about, the mothership, which is, the institution, the organization's brand, and the campaign brand on kind of a relational spectrum.
okay?
Um, you think about, should the campaign brand be a twin? Should it be a sibling, a cousin, a distant relative? It's holiday season, so I'll throw out the estranged relative, and sometimes brands are estranged.
Strange uncle, whatever. Yeah.
Strange. Strange and estranged, probably estranged because of. But
Right.
they should all have, shared DNA, unique energy. But the further down the spectrum you go, the less commonalities they have. So let's say at the twin level, you're at about 90%, whereas at the estranged level, you're probably about 90% unique. The goal is, in an ideal world, is that there's complement, not competing.
Okay.
So in an ideal world, really they're completely aligned and even sometimes sharing the exact same platform, if at all possible. And that's really, really hard to do with a lot of nonprofits.
Mhm.
When you can get the mothership brand and the campaign brand communicating and launching at the same time, sharing the same thing with the strategic plan, like that's magic. And
Yeah.
I will say we have seen a fair bit of that. We're creating some of that ourselves, but we really kind of see that as the unicorn. But I will say, a quick assessment is the longer it's been since an organization really rebranded, the further down the relational spectrum it tends to be. That's not, science, it's not fact, but it does tend to be a kind of a nice rule of thumb that if it's been 5, 6, 7 years since you launched your most recent mothership brand platform, we're probably going to be further out
Yeah.
because an institution, organization's kind of overarching umbrella brand, it tends to be very accurate. It's very representative of where we stand today, of where our feet stand. Whereas we see campaign brands as very much kind of a vision shaping exercise. Again, the tomorrow we hope to create together. And so, in a lot of instances, you actually called me the creative director. We have a creative director thing, our VP of creative. You don't want me to be your creative director, basically. But he came up with this great metaphor that in many ways it's like an inchworm that the campaign a lot of times is going to go out ahead of where the organization stands today, and then the institution, the organization catches up.
Hmm.
And that's really kind of the organizational brand as well. So that is something we spend a lot of time thinking about. Thankfully, we come in with very little ego when it comes to what that relationship needs to look like. But we do need to spend a lot of time really establishing that and understanding how closely aligned do the two need to be, how much shared DNA do they need to have. This is really, really important. Otherwise, what you end up creating is a competing branding environment.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Such good advice. You've spoken frequently about the power or need for good storytelling, uh, maybe some emotion in there. And I'm just wondering what thoughts you have on how how you develop the right stories, or what are the stories that you think are worth telling, or just how do you think about storytelling to begin with is in the context of campaign fundraising?
Yeah. So I think again, going back to, fundraisers really are excellent storytellers. I think a lot of times why we're hired is to tell the aligned, kind of conclusive, the shared overarching story that is very much the container that all these other stories can fall within. I think our job is to go out and collect as many stories as possible. But our job more than anything else is to ask the why behind those. Why did that happen? Why does this exist? Why do we need more of this? And then define that kind of those unifying what we call strategic through lines. What are those through lines that connect each of these stories, no matter what stakeholder that we're talking to? So our job is very much on the umbrella. We in many instances will come in to work to capture those kind of day-to-day stories that really transform investment into impact,
Yeah.
so that we can show a great reporting of an investment that's really important to donors. But in many instances, we really start and focus predominantly on the umbrella. But the way we like to look at it is, data informed story transforms. And actually, there's a really great book that just recently launched by an author and speaker by the name of Chirin Koshi. He wrote a book called Neurogiving and talks about the importance of balancing the rational and the emotional, because ultimately it is stories that move donors to support. It is the heart and the head. The heart really gets people hooked, and the head really kind of just helps you justify it. And so if you tell a donor a story that really inspires them, that gets them to those three magical words of tell me more, they're already halfway there. And at
Mm.
that point, they're just looking for confirmation of what the heart's already decided. So the stories are really, really, really critical. But I think so much of the hardest work that needs to be done is how do all those stories connect to create that platform that creates those tell me more moments. And then we get to share the impact stories. And then we get to share the kind of impact your very specific gift could make as a result of your investment. But at the end of the day, I mean, it really comes down to trust. It comes down to building trust. Why are we the organization that you're investing in when there are almost 2 million nonprofits nationwide? Why would you choose us? We've got to
Right.
find that kind of overarching theme and connection point to start to build that trust, to then be able to reinforce it with other stories.
Yeah, that's great. In thinking about going public on a campaign, this is a difficult topic because I don't think a lot of people capture the true nuances and differences between campaign types and and what needs to be accomplished prior to going public. I mean, I often counsel people between the difference between a comprehensive campaign and a over and above campaign, which would signal dramatically different timelines to go public and requirements. But as I kind of like think about all campaigns, they do have one interesting element that needs to be accomplished from my perspective before going public, and that's to make sure that you've communicated properly about the initiative with all of the family members, I guess, of the institution before it goes public. If you're thinking about a big tent, and a wedding or some big party, you want to make sure that everyone that you care about deeply or that has a stake in the institution is in that tent before you kind of go public to the broader community. That's just my simplistic way of thinking about the quiet phase versus the public phase. But I'd be interested to know how you think about the quiet phase versus public phase, and when you counsel organizations to go public.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we tend to follow your lead here as far as counsel is concerned, and we do agree that you really want to try and raise about 50 to 65% of the target. And I think there's so much work that needs to be done in the quiet phase beyond just the target, though, and I think it does come down to that internal alignment. It comes down to all those families singing from the same unified songbook. I mean, I think that's just absolutely essential. Clarity leads to confidence, and confidence builds credibility. And so, if the team's not organized, if it's not aligned, your donors are really going to feel that. Um, I think same with any brand experience you've ever had as a consumer. So think about, the Ritz experience, or even Motel 6 for that matter, right? Like you know what to expect regardless of where you're staying, and really for that matter, any brand in between to some degree, you know what to expect. So much of that is because there's clarity and there's alignment. That alignment as a consumer builds confidence that I know exactly what I'm signing up for. Same goes for a campaign. So I think there's the intangibles of that alignment that you need to ready the ships. Your data needs to be clean. You need to have the right amount of fundraisers, central marketing and communications, or your advancement communications. If you have a big enough team of development and advancement communicators, need to be aligned behind the idea of what we're doing here before we really go public. So I think those are some of the intangibles, as well as the campaign target. But I think it's so much more than just the campaign target. And I'll tell you, I'm a big fan of campaigns that stretch themselves. And I think if you can take the time to be really smart, really intentional, take your time, get it right, right? One of my favorite leaders: measure twice and cut once. Make sure everybody's as aligned as possible before you go public.
Yeah, that's great. Well, even after you go public, there's usually years and years before the campaign is concluded. And one of the uh, hard elements of campaigns is maintaining strong momentum, keeping things fresh and alive and exciting. And how do you, as um, a communications professional, kind of help keep that messaging fresh when these campaigns can sometimes seem never ending?
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously you got to keep showing progress. You got to keep telling stories. I love those mission moments. There's always new mission moments to be told and shared. I think turning milestones into moments of meaning, which, by the way, not the biggest fan of talking too much about the numbers. It's a great way to minimize a donor's impact. And to make them feel like a drop in the bucket. I'm a big fan of talking more about impact that's been created as a result of investment.
Nice.
Um, I would also say, something we've been trying recently, had some really great success with, especially if you're building a brand in the campaign readiness phase or in the earlier stages of the quiet phase, is actually doing a bit of a brand refresh and doing some lug nut tightening and refining. Maybe you've had new leadership come in, new strategic plan, new foundation president come in. Don't be afraid to kind of tighten things again. A case should be fluid. The world's changing so much from the time you launch a campaign to the time you finish. A brand should really be no different. And I think that's a really great way to keep things fresh as well, is, go back through a similar process, do some discovery interviews, do the messaging workshop, do the visual identity workshop again, see what tightening and refining we need to do to make sure that things stay fresh. But I'll tell you, a lot of times in a fundraiser's eyes, who's, working at the organizational level, they're going, I'm sick and tired of hearing this. If you're sick and tired of hearing it, that means you're talking about it enough.
Yeah,
But more
right.
often than not, it's not actually the donors who are sick and tired of hearing about it. You're just sick and tired of talking about it. But that's actually a good sign.
I know, right?
It means that you've been talking about it sufficiently. And so, don't chase after new and shiny just because we live in an Amazon world. I think, the fundamentals, the discipline and the rigor to really stick with it to the end. But again, if not, always a fan of a refresh, especially if it's been out in the wild, and you kind of need some tightening. But I'll tell you, the last thing is gratitude is always an awesome opportunity. Nothing really propels us in the future like looking back to say,
Mhm.
look how far we've come. I think
Yeah.
that's a great way to keep things fresh.
Yeah, yeah. I love the concept of love net tightening. That's so good. But it's really true. And uh it's nice what you said to connect back to that concept of really making sure that things are fresh, that things are evolving, that this is something that needs to maybe evolve and change over
Yeah.
time. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's an expectation maybe that over a 5, 7, 10 year period, things are going to change and things need to be different a little bit um, as you go through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to wrap up with just two quick questions. And the first one is about kind of looking ahead and how you see communications evolving over the foreseeable future. What are you looking at in terms of trends and tools or whatever? What are you excited about?
Well, I mentioned a few of them already. I'm excited about creating more alignment between, counsel and communications.
Great.
Um, I'm excited about challenging more fundraising leaders to really step into the role, step into their shoes of being storytellers and really owning the brand. Really, really excited about this idea of kind of this unicorn of campaign branding, and been pretty excited about the idea of making sure to keep things fresh. I mean, typical campaign, what would you say? The average about 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
Look at how much the world's changed in the last 5 or 6 years.
Right.
So, we really see campaigns kind of a living, breathing entity. And so the way we tell that story and how we're keeping up as an institution, how we're adapting and evolving has to keep up. I mean, AI is only going to accelerate this so much faster.
Right.
Which, by the way, I'll say, really excited about AI. I think it's helping us get to the right answers faster, but I very much see it as a tool, as an enabler.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are really scared of AI, don't really know what to think of it. And my favorite quote is Nathan Chappelle, who's leading the fundraising.ai movement, is AI won't replace fundraisers, it'll replace fundraisers who don't leverage AI.
Right.
I think that really hits the nail on the head for copywriters and strategists and designers.
Yeah.
So I think, really excited about what AI is going to enable, but I'm really excited for the sector. I think that we have the potential. I think the world's our oyster. I think that we really have the potential to finally grow past this kind of 2% GDP cap that we've been sitting at for forever. And I'm particularly inspired and excited about the next generation of donors and what their interests are, and understanding, how do you tap into those future donors? It used to be, just put my name on the wall and I'm very happy, and now it's much more that partnership mentality. I think donors' needs are evolving and changing, so we're just trying to keep up with the time. Same as you, Chris.
Yeah, no, it's great. All of those are really great things to look forward to and good advice for folks out there. Speaking of advice, final question for the leaders out there that are listening today who are thinking about launching a campaign in the next year or two. What's the single most important piece of advice you'd give them?
I mean, I think I pretty much covered it. With making sure to really lean into your role.
Yeah.
Really own that at the end of the day, this is a major marketing and communications and ultimately branding campaign. I think that's probably the most important piece of advice is, I think fundraising leaders are doing an amazing job really checking the boxes of so many different fields. But they really overlook the communications piece and the power that this thing can really have, because it's just uncomfortable. And I think if you just find the right partner, just like with counsel, back when, counsel and even, Giving Institute, so many of our members were professionalizing this as a sector, as a profession, as fundraising. I think, very similar thing is going to happen is fundraisers are really going to start to lean into their role and really own that. At the end of the day, it is our job to create this unified storytelling messaging platform, and to figure out what the brand of this thing is.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly grateful that you're out there championing fundraisers' role in storytelling and creative and all of that stuff. I think it's so important, and fundraisers aren't natural storytellers, so it's a great role for them to be filling. So if people want to get in touch with Parisleaf, how would they do that? Could you just share that?
Dial 188, call Chad. No.
Yeah, right.
You can connect. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. Email chad@parisleaf.com. I think those are probably the two best ways to get a hold of me, but pretty responsive on both those platforms.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
for those out there, if you want to have a great experience for your organization, taking communications through a campaign, definitely reach out to Chad, reach out to Parisleaf, an amazing organization. Have no reservations about recommending them whatsoever. But Chad, thank you for the time. It's been such a great time to reconnect with you, but also to learn from you. I took so many notes that I'm excited about exploring over the coming months with Fulcrum. And if you out there, audience, liked what you heard, please like and follow the Nonprofit Edge. We also have two other podcasts that I would encourage you to check out, Mastering Fundraising and also Lead for Good. In each of these podcasts, we interview an extraordinary individual who's contributing significant things in the nonprofit sector. And so just invite you to check those out. But until next time, thanks again for joining, and we'll see you all very soon. Take care, all.
Thank you for joining us for the Nonprofit Edge, a podcast series to promote purpose in practice. We hope you've enjoyed this presentation and learned some important lessons from our featured expert. We always want our content to be informative and to position nonprofit leaders to succeed. Please join us again for our next podcast. In the meantime, we wish you all the best and encourage you to learn more about Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership by visiting our website at www.fulcrumleader.com.